Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for joining this panel on driving change and imagining a different transport future, which is part of the Net Zero Week, the UK's National Awareness Week. Our discussion today departs from the premise that we will see more transport innovation over the next 10 years than what we have experienced over the previous 100. That is because today we experience unprecedented and very pressing challenges, but also because we are living in a time of very rapid technology advancement, which is creating some truly unique opportunities. And out of this tension of challenge and opportunity, we cannot quite foresee what that transport future will look like. But it's something that we will have to make even if we cannot quite see it. And we can navigate to better transport futures if we have a vision, or let's say, if we have imagination counterbalanced by a sense of action. And that's why we are here today. And I am delighted to share this panel, or to co-share rather this panel, representing various stages of the Open University journey. This is so we can exchange a variety of perspectives and engage in collective imagination. And with that, I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, starting, if I may, by Stephen Potter, who will be co-sharing this event with me. So over to you, Steph.
Thank you very much, Miguel. My title is Emeritus Professor of Transport Strategy here at the Open University. And I think the transport strategy side of things sort of sums it up. My background is very diverse. I did my PhD in transport at the OU itself many, many years ago. But more recently, we have been, Miguel and myself and a team here, have been working with Milton Keynes Council and a number of key organizations in exploring the role that innovative and new types of transport systems could make a real difference. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later, but that's broadly my background.
Thank you, Steve. Now, Osnur, may I ask you to introduce yourself? You're on mute, sorry to say. Still on mute? There you are. Oh, sorry, we seem to have a bit of an issue, so if I may. Still on mute, so if I may, I will ask Chinedu to introduce himself, and I'll give you a second to figure out the audio. So with that, Chinedu, sorry to put you on the spot, but now it's unexpectedly your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. Can you hear me okay?
Indeed, yeah. Loud and clear.
All right, yeah. So my name is Chinedu Nevo, and I'm just completing my PhD at the Open University. My research is on the strategy of businesses, renewable energy startups in African emerging markets. So I'm looking at the intersection of renewable energy strategy and sustainability. I've also done some work on the total cost of ownership of electric vehicles in the Zambian transport system. So I also have an idea looking at electric vehicles, or looking at clean energy in terms of transport system from the cost perspective. Yeah, because we're talking about the cost, and it's quite expensive to transition. And I'm sure it's a discussion we'll have later on. Currently, I work as a Knowledge Transfer Partnership Associate at Sheffield Hallam University, also helping a charity to raise some more money, to enhance their funding model. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Osnur, let's give it another try. It was working fine 2 minutes ago for the pre-meeting.
Oh, really? Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. There you are.
Apologies for the inconvenience, first of all. Thanks so much, Miguel, once again. I'm a senior lecturer in operations and supply chain management, and I'm from business school. So my main research interest is in the intersection area of B2B marketing and supply chain management. I have a particular interest in service supply chains, and recently I'm much more interested in the sustainability perspective. I think that's why I'm here today. So one of my colleagues from Heriot-Watt University Emine and I have been conducting a project on servitization and the opportunities of servitization in supply chains, particularly focusing on the UK transport system. Mainly, we are trying to find some solutions for the sustainable transport systems. Hopefully, my perspective coming from buyer-supply relations, supply chain, and logistics would be meaningful today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I must say that I am very happy that we have this wide variety of perspectives. I am always concerned when we talk about a transport transition. We think that it is just switching for electric vehicles, but there is always the impact of how this affects logistics, how this affects countries other than the United Kingdom, how it affects the rail systems, for instance. There are many dimensions that we don't think about often, and that's why we're all here having this conversation. And in that note, I would welcome Paul, who has another perspective to add to this. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Miguel. Yeah, so my name is Paul Hodgson. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a rail professional. Left school at 16 and went straight into an apprenticeship, and I've worked on locomotives and infrastructure across the breadth of the railway, the heavy rail system in the UK. Consultant engineer since 2003, which is when I coincidentally started my PhD with Steve. And I looked at the cost and environmental modelling of a transit system, on the basis that there's a lot of focus put into the hard cash, the upfront capex, and then the operational cost of running the system. But what attention is actually paid to the environmental burden? And then sort of rolling into the net zero theme, effectively that's an equation. You've got the burden on the left of the equal sign, the payback, the environmental payback on the right hand side. So payback starts when the service commences and people start using the system, but the burden starts before the first spade breaks ground. And is there enough emphasis put into understanding what that burden actually is prior to actually looking for any sort of recovery on environmental cost? So for example, HS2, massive amount of construction work going on, 350 live sites, 31,000 employees, massive disruption around the motorway network around Birmingham, building all the infrastructure. Tailpipe emissions have all been increased because of the nature of building the project. Has that been accounted for? When does the payback start? And it's just sort of challenging those things and just seeing, you know, what the actual answer is to it's not all about the vehicle. It is all about the system with a capital S for me. So yeah, glad to be taking part and really appreciate the offer.
Perfect, and thank you so much. We very much welcome your industry perspective. Particularly, I welcome it as a lecturer. I guess it is my turn to introduce myself now. Last, but hopefully not least, although let's not make it a competition. I am Miguel Valdez. I am a lecturer in technology and innovation management. I joined the OU in 2010 as a PhD student, also one of Steve's students, actually. There, we have a theme going on here. I then became a research associate, and now I work full-time in research and teaching as a lecturer, working in future urban environments. Through the years, my interest in future urban environments went from electric vehicles to smart cities to urban artificial intelligence and urban robots now. And also wearing my lecturer hat on, I would like to mention that I am chair for 2 postgraduate modules. I share T849, Strategic Capabilities for Technological Innovation, and TV872, Managing Change with Systems Thinking in Practice. And I would also like to advertise modules shared by my colleagues here. Please correct me if I did my homework wrong, but I understand that OSNUR also shares a postgraduate module, B872, which is Creating and Sustaining Value, and is also a team member for B207, Shaping Business Opportunities. And Stephen Potter, the list of modules that he has worked on is longer than my arm, but some examples that comes to mind is T317, Innovation, Designing for Change, T219, Environmental Management, and U116, which is Environment, Journeys Through a Changing World, and TV801, Technology and Innovation Management. I also wrote a bit of that one. But Now, having advertised our various modules, I would like to leave the microphone again over to Steve for a bit of a provocation to get the conversation proper started. So over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Miguel. Enough for the commercial break there. Actually, we planned this a good while ago, long before we knew there'd be an election last week. And I think it's incredibly timely at the moment. I've just been looking at the people coming in. I was looking to see if Louise Haig is joining us today, but unfortunately, I don't think she is at the moment. That's the new Secretary of State for Transport. And it makes me wonder that if we were one of the advisors or going to be mentioning something to Louise Haig, what we might actually suggest as a result of this discussion. And I think perhaps as we work our way through, we might be thinking of that. The other possibility, and I think this is a slightly mischievous one on my part, is perhaps we should not be talking to the Secretary of State for Transport, but to Peter Kyle, who is the new Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. I think that's quite interesting. So there's, we're into both a time of change in transport, and I think politically into a time of opportunity as the new government emerges and is looking for ways forward. We've got to remember that also Tony Blair, I think it was yesterday, was commenting on the financial dilemma that the new government is facing and said that actually a key way out of the financial dilemma might be to embrace the potential of new technologies rather than trying to use them to patch up old systems. And I think there's quite something in that from Blair, and which we may take forward. The panel had a discussion note that was sent around to try to get some thoughts going. So I hope that did actually work. You might disagree with it. It had a very public transport focus. That partially was because that's what Miguel and I have been working on recently. But do widen this to your own areas of interest within the transport sector. And as Miguel said, we've got people here representing a quite diverse area. And I think that is extremely good. So I'd like to kick off with a general question, really, and I'd like to go around the panel as a whole about this. And if you had to pick up a subject that you feel is the most pressing challenge for transport issues today, quite concisely, a couple of minutes each and no more than that, because we want to get going through. Let's see what your most pressing challenge might be. Who shall I start with? I think I'll start with Osna, please.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. Since you mentioned the elections and new government members and so on, actually, you reminded me of one of the aspects that we found critical in our project, and I would like to really hear from you. Because when we started our project, we have realized that any member of the supply chain would do their best in terms of sustainability if we give them the guidelines. But there will be some constraints, challenges, but the main challenge will be the skills and capabilities of the individuals. Do you agree or disagree? Because we have been talking about technology, we have been talking about sustainability, future, but all of these are different. Require different skills, capabilities, knowledge, and these skills, capabilities, and knowledge should be shared. But who knows better than the other one? These are ongoing questions for our project, and I will be pleased to hear from you. And I believe that this will be the main challenge for the whole sector. What do you think?
I will do a quick response on that. I must say, in some of the projects we've been working with, the main challenge has been the skills and capabilities of the people involved in implementing them. you tend to have in the transport sector a very traditional structure of project control. So you get your cash in through taxation, you then have total project control management over it. That involves quite traditional civil engineering and economic skills and capabilities. Whereas perhaps we need more business studies, team building, situations where you have to put together a partnership between private and public sector and know how to manage that. And those are not necessarily the skills that are central to traditional ways of doing transport projects. So that's my observation on that. I think we swap over to Paul might be nice there. You might have a different priority, but you may have some thoughts on that coming from the sort of work that you do in industry.
Absolutely, and to echo your point there about in terms of continuing the same behaviours and expecting different results, the very definition of lunacy. Apologies for the cliche, but you look at the different light rail systems that went aimed for development through the earlier part of the century, like Edinburgh, fell way short, and it was that traditional approach. You have to go down this particular route, whereas what we found, looking at the studies we did, that actually going through a more iterative approach where you build the systems up, build the business cases for getting the passengers on board the system, and then investing the money. And so innovation is actually about the way you approach the problem, not necessarily the end point. So right now you've got Coventry developing this very light rail concept, which from day one they're burdening themselves with rails, which therefore ties them into a particular vehicle type, which ties them into a regulatory framework. That once the system's live, you lose the flexibility of operation. All these things, it doesn't necessarily mean that the best solution is necessarily the most complex one. And it's that change in thinking which then drives a change in approach and everything else. And I think there's a lot to be learned from looking at mainland Europe, where they didn't necessarily go for overhead wires and rails, guided buses, conductive systems, battery systems. These things are available and well trodden. So let's embrace that, I think.
Okay, I could see Chinadu doing a lot of nodding. Are you going to come in on this subject, or is there another priority that you can think of?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, I've been listening, and it's quite insightful, some of the challenges that have been mentioned. But I want to approach it from cost, because, in my work for the Zambian Electric Mobility Innovation Alliance and in the survey we conducted, one of the things we found that actually discourage people from adopting the electric vehicle or other cleaner means of transport is the initial cost. So I think the initial cost, which includes the high cost of electric vehicles themselves, the limited charging infrastructure, because now we are talking about the already existing infrastructure, which were modeled with the conventional fuel in mind. Now, incorporating places, for instance, public places for building the charging infrastructure for the electric vehicles, talking about the battery life and how to dispose them, all the disposal concerns and the cost implication of these disposal mechanisms, and every other thing involved. I think cost is still a big barrier because, comparing to the last 5 to 7 years where this cost has reduced significantly, but I would say that financial consideration or the cost consideration is still a very huge challenge because there is a lot that goes in. Of course, there is usually the argument that if you are looking at the cost over the life of the electric vehicle, then you might say that on the average, it is still lower than, the conventional fuel, or diesel vehicles. But within the time, at the time of installation, at the time of purchase, that initial cost is a very huge challenge for a lot of people, I must say. Yeah, thank you.
Miguel, have you got some thoughts to come in on the priorities and what might be the most pressing challenge at the moment? We've been talking more about people skills and cost structures.
And I am glad you asked, because I was thinking about people and technology as a way of splitting things. Now, in the age of artificial intelligence, I don't want to say that robots are people, but robots are entities with their own intelligence, with their own way of acting in the world. In a way, we have to help robots or artificial intelligence more broadly work on their skills. So it's about the skills of technology and also about designing for a future with robots, with artificial intelligences that we cannot quite foresee. To ground this a bit, I would like to go back in time 100 years or so, when we were figuring out how to design cities for the car. And the problem is that we design cities that work beautifully for cars, but don't quite work for humans. Or on the other hand, if anyone has tried to drive a car in a lovely Victorian town or in a medieval kind of village that evolved into a big city, you know that trying to drive a car in a city that was done before anyone knew what a car would look like is also a problem. What I am driving towards, apologies for the pun, is that we cannot design cities just for the car or cities without the car, or rather, now 100 years later, we will have to live with robots. And the challenge is to design ways of living with a technology that we don't quite know yet how it is going to work, but it is going to be here. It started in one city in the UK, it is now in half a dozen or more. I think eventually we'll live with robots all over. And we don't want to design cities just for robots because they will look just like factories, I fear. But we cannot design cities just for humans and forget about the robots, because then we will be missing an opportunity. So more broadly speaking, how do we design for a technology that is learning just as we are learning, leaving room for a future that is open? And with that, I stop because we are trying to keep to 2 minutes, but thank you, Steve, for the opportunity.
Okay, I've just been looking in the chat and it's quite interesting, the comments coming through saying we need much more coordination between sectors, including manufacturing, construction, agricultural, even education, it says. And I think this is the thing about not thinking in silos, but thinking about how we can actually work cross sectors and cross skills. And that seems to be an important thing coming through. But also the challenge is that things are actually changing rapidly. And Miguel's point about robots is a very important one. And thinking in terms of globally, emerging economies, and how these new technologies and these new systems interact globally. And it's not just a matter of the UK electrifying its transport systems. Remember, a lot of in fact, I think it's almost the majority of our cars, when they become second-hand and eventually work their way down the trade, end up in other countries that have to actually deal with the technologies there. And at the moment, emerging economies in Africa, South America, and Asia are dealing with internal combustion engine vehicles with the new electronics from the 1990s and 2000s. And in a few years' time, they're going to have to be dealing with the battery electric vehicles that work their way there internationally. It's an international system. And I think that's one of the points that was coming through in the chat from some of the people there. So, okay, there's some of the challenges. And there was a hint in there of opportunities. So if you wanted to pick up on what you feel is the most exciting opportunity at the moment, what would you pick up upon? And I'm going to start with somebody else. I think it might be Chinedu to start with, and thinking perhaps internationally.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Steve, for that question. Well, there's a huge prospect for the future of transport. And for me, I think I would echo what Miguel said. The biggest opportunity at the moment is the artificial intelligence, or the use of machine learning, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, big data. These are the major area. These are some of the things that could be embedded into whatever technological advancements that are being pursued. For instance, apart from the use of robots, for deliveries, like we've seen some of them in Milton Keynes and some other places, the artificial intelligence themselves, they offer that opportunity to optimize traffic flow, for instance. they could help in reducing congestion, especially in densely populated cities. And we're talking about the fact that population growth is very rapid and will continue like this for for the foreseeable future. So that means that there might be more traffic issues in the future, but using artificial intelligence to actually help to reduce congestion, and this will also enhance safety through things like predictive analytics. So artificial intelligence will go a long way, and if it is richly explored, it can actually expand a whole lot in the future of transport. And we're also talking about autonomous vehicles, for instance, which have more safety features, and they create more efficient and reliable transport systems and all of that. So artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, they provide the biggest opportunity for the future of transport, if I may say.
Great, thanks. An observation I got from my side is that quite a big discussion occurring in Milton Keynes here is that we need 5G everywhere to exploit artificial intelligence and robotic systems. And I think there could be an important point as to what systems can be introduced without too expensive IT infrastructure to support it, or what can be robust without 5G. And we introduced the robots here without 5G, the delivery vehicles. So that I think this is almost a point that Paul raised, is you don't need the all singing, all dancing side of things in order to make some progress. Paul, you've sort of frozen on my screen, but are you still there?
I am still there. I think I dropped out momentarily. Teams did a wobble, and but then it didn't seem like I'd left at all. But I am still here, honestly. Yeah.
Okay, you're still there. What do you see as the most exciting opportunity at the moment, Paul?
It's difficult. I'm going to say I'm very pessimistic, and I don't mean to be overtly that way at all. I think sort of picking up on the thing about integration, and I'm very UK centric, so apologies for that if needed. And it is about integrating the different modes and finding what fits the implementation at any sort of for any particular context. So local to me here, they keep talking about reinstigating a local line between Burton and Leicester, the Ivanhoe line, and it will automatically bring all these benefits. And actually looking at it, there is so much that would need to be done to make it purposeful that would actually be far better spent in a better technology bus with a sort of better prioritized running and things like that, rather than throwing money at what would be a bit of a white elephant, to be honest. I think the change in government and the sort of the review of HS2, I think that presents a great opportunity to actually not necessarily reinstate everything again, but just to actually focus in on what the benefits really could be, and if there's any transfer off the West Coast main line, because that's fit to burst, and driving things through that sort of route and freeing up forgive me, the diagrams, that's the word I'm looking for, the diagrams on the West Coast. I think that would be a benefit, but it is about a change in thinking and approach, as opposed to lots of new innovative new technology and the like you say, you don't need 5G to get a phone signal.
No, there was a thing there you were mentioning there, which I think might be worthwhile picking up, is that people's expectations are built around the way in which they know transport at the moment. It's like Ford's classic phrase that he never asked people about the design of cars, because if he asked people if they wanted for a better form of transport, they'd say faster horses. You've got this all these opportunities emerging. I was looking at some of the online comments about the sort of bus tram that's being introduced in South London, and they're incredibly cynical, saying, "No, we don't want a bus tram. We want proper trams in London with rails and overhead lines and costing £2 billion." So there is a thing here about user expectations and user understandings. And I think actually myself, almost the most exciting opportunity is actually working with people to actually understand what is the potential that there could be these days, rather than it just being a small professional community. Anyway, that's my half penneth worth.
Can I just add something on there? Sorry, though.
Yeah, Paul.
Very briefly. So the bus tram in London, the emphasis seems to be on it's got bigger windows, the vehicle, and it's got covered wheels, which means people won't get dragged underneath it if they get caught by the wheels.
Yeah.
Which is at the other end of the scale from what you're saying in terms of people expecting overhead wires and the lights. But there is that middle ground where provide a reliable service that people can expect to turn up on time, regular, frequent, all that kind of stuff, which doesn't need overhead wires, but it does need some sort of provision, some complementary measures taken on the infrastructure, which you don't get from covered wheel arches and big windows. And again, it's just that change up in thinking, I think.
Yeah, that was the thing in your PhD project, Paul, was not just to introduce bus-type trams, but to actually have proper priorities and proper infrastructure to support them, and don't have them as things entirely on the cheap. And that's quite important. They are more cost effective, but they're not going to be real cheap stuff. So that's what. Osno, if I just come across to you, what do you feel? Perhaps think in terms of logistics, as you might see the most exciting opportunity, or whatever you feel there.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I've been thinking about a common word or a buzzword that is very common in the supply chain area, which is collaboration. Since we have been discussing different aspects, and Paul mentioned some issues, but also potential opportunities as well. So all of these potential opportunities for the future of transport needs much more collaboration among the supply chain members. If we just focus on logistics, let's just consider a truck operator or third-party logistics firm and truck manufacturers. A kind of technology that you mentioned, let's say that artificial intelligence embedded into the system of truck operators or third-party logistics firms, that is mainly used for the performance of transport. In that case, we have been talking about, for instance, as Chinedu mentioned, cost might be one of the challenges that I mentioned. As I mentioned, for instance, a truck driver might not be capable of using the new technology, but the truck manufacturer might have that capability, opportunity, knowledge, whatever. So I believe that in order to go towards net zero, much more collaboration between these stakeholders, actors is needed. And if one party has money, capital, then that should be shared with the other parties. If one party has the critical knowledge, then that should be shared with the other party. It is not only for being good, but getting the advantage as the system. So if this would be understood as a whole system, I believe that it will be easier for the whole transport sector to implement future transport strategies. I know that I'm talking about really from the wide perspective, and I'm just giving some examples, very general. I can give you some particular examples as well, but we have been conducting some case studies, and we are optimistic about this, because when a sector member, a practitioner, understands the potential advantage for the whole system, they appreciate it, and they start to think of how to implement this. I think as the academics and the policymakers, because they are one of the stakeholders as well, it is our responsibility to better explain why it is needed, how such strategies could be implemented, and what should be the guidelines coming from the policymakers to make such strategies possible. But since you mentioned internationalization, you reminded me of thinking. It reminded me of the potential opportunities and threats in global supply chains, because as you mentioned, yes, we need suppliers in other countries, and we have customers only in the UK, for instance. In such a case, there are some other rules, regulations, obligations that we need to consider. But again, I'll finish with the keyword collaboration, because it's the only way that we can solve such problems, I guess.
I was just thinking at that point whether Chinedu wants to say anything from this sort of emerging economy perspective on some of those things we were discussing there.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Steve. Let me pick from the last thing Usna said about collaboration, because, you know, when we are talking about the working together between sectors, maybe education, transport, and all of that, I think it's also important to look at it from the perspective of public-private partnership. You know, because you have the public providing the public oversight, providing the research funding, providing the regulation, and then you have the private sector providing the innovation, providing the efficiency for the development of these things. So because if I bring it down, I'm from Nigeria, and now this relationship, this collaboration is lacking. Sometimes you hear people in the private sector complaining that the government or the public sector make themselves unreachable to them. And no matter what they are thinking, no matter the innovation or the efficiency or whatever they want to develop or they want to incorporate into the future of transport, they don't get the needed support. They don't even have a clarity on the kind of policies that can support them. So I think if there is this sort of relationship and that synergy between the public and private, it will help, like Nigeria, like Zambia. It will know, okay, the private sector will know, okay, we have the government support. Government can actually help us to achieve this. So it's not just an industry kind of collaboration, but that public-private partnership also gives the private practitioners the confidence to, you know, to delve into whatever innovation they want to contribute. Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, Miguel will come to it in a moment, but I think it's very interesting that all our responses here are returning to the skills and capabilities issue about we need a different way of doing things. We need a more relational approach rather than a traditional contracting sticks and carrots, which is the traditional way of setting up competitive tenders and the traditional relationship between government and industry. We want a more relational one where there have been some developments, I would say, in business models, but perhaps we need to be embracing more and exploring those business models. The one thing I think is really interesting in when I was asking about exciting opportunities, none of you have said it's a particular technology, let's run with this. This is the one we can do now and quickly. You're talking actually about managerial structures, about governmental structures, that you need actually a different culture and way of working between the public and the private sectors. And that, I think, is a really crucial point. Miguel, sorry, I'd left you out so far. Have you got any final thoughts on this question?
I would go back to the technologies, because in the end, we are in a time of unique technological opportunities. Artificial intelligence, everyone is talking about it. And I am aware that if we are talking about human level or superhuman level artificial intelligence, and there is a lot of discussion about that during the summit in Milton Keynes last year. If we talk about those superhuman level artificial intelligences, the carbon footprint of that one is enormous. It is probably a false economy to think artificial economy is going to solve our problems if having a single ChatGPT operation has the carbon footprint of an international flight or something along those lines. But the point I am building to is that there are that's the universal artificial intelligence, but narrow artificial intelligences are far less expensive to operate, have a far smaller footprint. I mentioned this because what I am excited about in the short term today is about grocery deliveries by robots. I am partially excited about it because it makes me feel like I am living in a science fiction movie when I go out on the road and a robot is coming in the other direction, but also because the robot, if the robot is bringing the bread and milk, and it's a robot this size maybe, if the robot is doing that, instead of me having to drive half a ton of steel in my car to get that milk, that cereal, that's a big saving in carbon footprint, assuming this is a modest artificial intelligence, an efficient artificial intelligence that is not burning enormous amounts of power in its data center. And an important theme in all the responses so far to this question has been collaboration. And I am aware that a robot running on the street is not happening by itself. It's not the government putting robots. It's a grocery shop, a grocery chain putting robots in collaboration with this artificial intelligence organization, in collaboration with the government, with the local authorities, setting rules for how to run those robots on the roads that they have to share with pedestrians so we can coexist harmoniously. And this is often in the framework of a national policy attitude towards artificial intelligence, which is to say, again, it is a concrete technology, a very narrow technology, even. But for making this one work, to make the most of this opportunity, we need lots of collaboration with private actors, with local authorities, with national government. So for me, it is both, and with an eye to using our resources efficiently, not to get carried away by the power of high technology, but sometimes there is a more modest technology, making use of the infrastructures that we already have that will get the job done. And with that, I will stop. Over to you, Steph.
That's right. Miguel, you've actually slid into my next set of questions, really, which is if Paul can think a little bit more optimistically for the moment. Okay, that's got a smile on you. But if we could think about what might be positive developments, what could be the most positive sort of transport system that could emerge in the next 20 years? Think on the bright side. And what might be the first step? What might be the next step towards getting towards that positive vision? Now, I think we've had a few hints from Miguel there, so I want to pass over to one of others. Paul, I was being cheeky to you, so let's go on. You have the first go.
Wow, yeah, on the spot there. Just on the collaboration theme, if only, this is not a new problem. If only somebody'd done a study perhaps into why the advanced passenger train didn't work a few years ago, Steve, eh?
Yeah, okay. It was lack of collaboration. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a new issue. No. Yeah. In terms of the positive developments, it's got to be about spending money in the right way to the right end, and I don't know. It's difficult to grasp within the UK rail industry at the minute because we just seem to be rolling through these the same old issues. There's a lot to be gained from electrifying routes, provided it's seen right through. So Great Western, we failed to deliver the whole system. So some of the sort of the hidden benefits of the environmental benefits that could come with that. In fact, you've got lighter rolling stock. There's less wear on the rails. There's less maintenance, and less maintenance means less track mules, less replacement buses. All this kind of stuff. All this thinking. It's putting together what could be a deliverable, integrated, sort of joined up system that means we can properly bring out the benefits that will come from putting these systems in place. So the great potential in South Wales at the minute with the Transport for Wales up the valleys, quite heavily involved with some of the sort of technical work down there, and you can just see there's just these little bits and pieces that are just a bit more foresight in the areas before where they got down this adversarial approach between some of the contractors and Transport for Wales themselves. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn there if there's any guys on the call from them. It just there were benefits there that could still be had, and it's just let's get around the table and discuss those sort of opportunities in terms of actual systems and implementation of systems. That there are things there. Just I'll be honest, I'm still back in the pessimistic mode and trying to pull myself out of that. Sorry. there's a lot can be done. There is a lot that can be
Okay,
done.
so
You have
anybody
to come
else
back to
out
me
there
for
that's
specifics. Sorry.
thanks, Paul. Anybody else out there that's Chinedu, are you feeling more optimistic?
Well, not as pessimistic as Paul, yeah, but but I think yeah, I am optimistic. But again, we've been talking about technology, you know, all this while we've been talking about all the end. But there are really simple things that, you know, we can do even starting from today. Because what about fostering a culture of sustainability, for instance, through education and policy? You know, change is hard. And many people fight change. So sometimes when you focus on the beauty of the technology itself and the innovation, you know, without paying attention to whether people will actually accept and adopt this innovation, then it becomes a problem where from a very positive outlook, yes, this technology is great, it will do this and that, but people simply don't want to use them.
Yeah.
Yes, now talking from the emerging economy perspective again, where it's really difficult to get to convince people to stop using ICE vehicles and move to electric vehicles, for instance. I think there is need for more education. A lot of people are uninformed about what this future of transport looks like and how they will need to change their behavior and their way of living. So I think it's also important. Yes, I'm very positive. The outlook is great. The technology is thriving, even starting from today. But we have to pay attention to the fact that if people refuse to adopt this technological advancement, then it is just there. It is just a project. I mean, the future of transport is designed with the people in mind, or the assumption is that it should be human-centric, right? So if it is human-centric, then we also have to pay attention to the people's willingness to adopt it. So these are some of the areas I would also like us to put in mind. Some of those things like car sharing, things like carpooling, or some of those sustainable lifestyles and practices we can embed will even make this innovation more significant and effective. Yeah.
My own thought, I'll come to Osner in a moment. My own thought is let's have some innovations and examples, perhaps they could just be local ones, which people find inspiring. I'm quite influenced by the delivery robots here in Milton Keynes, because when they were first introduced, there was a lot of uncertainty and people were very unsure about them. And I absolutely adore them now. There's kids going around patting the local robots and trying to feed them bananas. Because there's a particular, and also actually in the lockdown, the robot deliveries were the only ones that kept going when the supermarket delivery services collapsed. And so then they're actually loved and cherished. And finding other key examples, I think, first steps, which people will love and cherish and value for improving their travel behavior or improving their quality of life. And that can be both, it can be both freight and it can be personal travel, can actually be really useful. Osner, come back to you now, thinking about, okay, what will be your inspiration for the future and how might we be getting there? What might be the first steps heading there?
Thanks so much, Steve. I'll be optimistic as well. And I was about to talk about COVID. Hi, Paul. Talk about COVID, impact of COVID and lockdown and so on. So thanks so much for making an introduction to that. I believe that we all who experienced the impacts of COVID learned how to cope with big disruptions as a supply chain members. And as the individuals, we have realized that if we are forced to, we are ready to adopt ourselves to the new service design, new technologies, and new innovations/service innovations. We have been talking about kind of service innovations because I consider all of these technologies and their implications in transport sector would be kind of service innovation. I believe that after COVID experience, of course, I cannot support these with particular research outputs yet, but I feel that we are much more ready to become resilient to the changes, and will be much more welcoming new technologies to our systems. That's why I'm optimistic, much more optimistic than before.
That's interesting. I've just been having a quick look through the chat, and I think there's some interesting things here that, you know, present ways, present attitudes being very stubborn, which is the thing here, is how you actually overcome those. One talking about getting the basics working very well. May not win titles, but we can confirm playing in the Champions League. I think there's an analogy there. Perhaps we can work on that. It's how you actually organize public-private partnerships. One question was thinking about that in Nigeria or so forth. And a lot of it about cultural, you know, providing things that are actually inspiring in what is actually quite a negative culture in the transport field, which I think is quite a crucial challenge. We've just got a few minutes before I need to hand back to Miguel. Have any of the panelists got any further thoughts they want to add to us here today? Miguel.
If I may jump in with, I have also been keeping an eye on the chat, and I see there is a comment there that says that the culture in the UK is very negative towards human-powered transportation or active travel, walking and cycling. I would just like to say that I am very excited about walking and cycling, because robots, in a way, sorry to have my obsession with robots this day, but the point made in the chat is that the UK is very hard to navigate for pedestrians and cyclists. And I think that the kind of spaces, urban spaces that robots can navigate well, are also spaces that cyclists and pedestrians can navigate well. If I am having a hard time navigating a crowded sidewalk, a crowded pavement, or if there is no pavement and I have to merge in with the traffic, the robot is not going to be able to do that. And also, importantly, if we think of users of mobility scooters, for instance, wheelchairs, walking aids, those also cannot use these hostile urban environments. So I think that if we build places that are inclusive for all humans, all active travel, all robots, we can use the technology almost as an excuse or a wedge for creating urban environments that work for all. And that is my vision of a good future and how to get to it. Robots are in a way the excuse, because it's all about us humans. With that.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel. That's quite clever. Actually, pick up the point that the technologists might actually like funding, but it happens to help all in that case. That's an interesting idea. Paul, you were waving.
Yeah, sorry, just to go on with the cycling theme and back to integration. You know, there seems to be an emphasis at the moment with the train operating companies to restrict people from taking bikes on trains, and this is perhaps where an integration again, not just at the sort of the level of the passenger, but the technology that exists to allow people to book tickets between different modes, different providers, booking on bikes, things like, you know, onto trains, things like that. That just doesn't seem to be embraced. You know, I've had ticket claims refuted by one train company because I bought the ticket on a different train company's app. I mean, there's no, and that's back to collaboration, but it's I don't know. So my pessimism could be born out of extreme frustration that we could and should be so much more effective with what we're spending and how we're doing it, I think. So, yeah.
Okay. On that cheery point, Paul, but a very important one, I hand back to Miguel for wrapping up, please.
Thank you, because I realize we have about 3 minutes left. And also I realize that people will want to attend some other events. As you are surely aware, more webinars are taking place across the week, the Net Zero Week. And I would encourage you, all participants and audience, to visit www.netzeroweek.com/business to get involved in more live and exclusive events. Although again, I suspect I am preaching to the converted. You probably have another event part of this week to catch in 3 minutes. So with that, Gabriela, please, over to you. I see you have.
Yeah, I just wanted to
something
mention that. Thank you so much, Miguel. The Net Zero Week event, that will send the recording out via email. So anybody has any questions or asking for references, they can get in touch through the sustainability email address. And yeah, I just wanted to thank the panel. It was such an interesting conversation on collaboration, skills, technologies. It's just great to hear, in a sense, that yeah, we've got everything available to make a change basically already. And yeah, being a Net Zero Week, Net Zero Awareness Week, hopefully we managed to inspire people to take that step and take this content back and start conversations around that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. If I may take another minute, just to encourage people to stay in touch with the Open University, because we have open learning modules that if you like what you heard today, you can use Open Learn. You just search Open Learn and some keywords that you are interested about, and I am sure you will find something. I would like to mention, for instance, technology management for strategic innovation. If you Google that and Open Learn, I am sure you will find one of my modules. Or if you look for Open Learn systems thinking, you will find something. Transport sustainability, business models, you name it, you will find it. And also, if you want to stay in touch in a more active way, we have the Challenges program, we have open societal challenges, knowledge transfer partnerships and vouchers. You can really work with us to jointly explore these projects. And I would really encourage you to stay in touch with us, please. We thrive on these interactions with government, with local authorities, with industry. So I would not like this conversation to just end with this today. Please, let's carry on thinking of a better transport future. And with that, I think...
Just to point out that all those resources are free. Yeah, which is an important Open University principle, that.
And with that, I think we don't have anything else to do other than thank our panelists and our audience. Thank you so much for being with us here today, and thank you for sharing your insight and your perspectives.
Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the event.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.